Greetings from Tokyo, my friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope all of you are doing well. I am almost finished with my discussion of the Ingmar Bergman cinema box set from the Criterion collection, and I hope maybe some of you have seen my past videos on this box set, and I hope it's given the impression of my overall admiration for this set, because indeed I am truly in admiration. This is a stunning presentation from Criterion, and I'm quite impressed with the Criterion collection and this set. This is potentially a game changer in terms of releases, and if this set enjoys a lot of financial success for the Criterion collection, then who knows what the future has in store for other kinds of box set of this kind and caliber. So I am just totally impressed. That being said, I must say that there are certain criticisms that, with all due respect to Criterion, I think can be made, and in some instances I think should be made with respect to this box set. You know, not all releases, there's no such thing, I think, as a perfect release. I think every release, whether it's a Blu-ray or a DVD or a box set of this kind, I think upon scrutiny, I think can be subject to criticism. And so, based on my own experience, I think I have a number of criticisms that I think are worth mentioning for those of you who might be interested in getting the set but haven't made a decision yet, and the like. So here's just some things that I've come across that I think are worth mentioning in terms of criticisms of this set. First, as a kind of quality control issue, I've noticed, and I haven't experienced this directly, but I have heard from acquaintances of mine, from people I've known on Facebook who have also purchased a set. Not everyone, but there have been some people who have indicated that the discs that are included in the set, as they appear in this sort of book form, some people, not everyone, but some people have indicated that not all the discs are in. Other people have indicated that there have been errors. Perhaps there have been two of the same disc instead of in lieu of all the discs being there. In other words, one disc was inserted by mistake instead of another disc. So this is probably something to do with a mistake that occurred at the plant, at the manufacturing site of this particular thing. I know of one person who said that he got his set and none of the discs were included in these little sleeves. So that's a very big thing in terms of quality control. So please be careful when you get your set, and make sure that you inspect it immediately. And if you have any issues with any lost discs, any discs that should have been included but haven't been included, you should contact Criterion immediately, and I'm sure they will arrange a replacement. Now, I have heard, again, also from all these people who have had issues with discs not being included, some discs being duplicated, etc., that they were able to contact Criterion, and Criterion was able to remedy the problem. So if you get the set, I urge you to open it, just take off the plastic wrapping, and just inspect all the discs just to make sure that everything is included. They're all numbered, so you should be able just to eye it and be sure. Of course, the best way is to play each disc just to make sure. But again, I've noticed that some people have had issues with not all the discs being here. So that's one issue of quality control that I think needs to be addressed, and you should keep that in mind when you buy this, especially because it's a lot of money. And so, I mean, it's really, you know, Criterion Collection's sort of bread and butter, so to speak, with respect to physical media is, of course, selling something that purports to be the disc that is, you know, that's being advertised on the tin, so to speak. So if you get something that doesn't have those discs, then I think that goes against the very heart of what the Criterion Collection is all about. And so please, I know, you know, Criterion Collection is a company of very high quality control, so hearing these stories is a little bit surprising. still, I mean, it can happen to the best of us. So, and Criterion is very good at remedying these issues in a very quick manner. So, if you do come across this issue with respect to your own purchase experience, don't hesitate to let Criterion know, and I'm sure someone from there will be able to handle it in a quick manner. So that's one kind of, not criticism, but one issue that I see. But the other criticism, and this is a substantive criticism I have, is with respect to the presentation of a certain aspect of Ingmar Bergman. This comes up in the essay by Karan Mahajan called Foreign Tongues, and this is on the films The Touch and The Serpent's Eggs, which is starting on page 148 of the book. Now, the essay on these two films is really fascinating because these two films, the films are quite interesting, and in particular The Touch, it's a fascinating film. The Serpent's Egg, too, is a film that's worthy of attention. It's not as bad as I thought it was, and it's actually quite compelling in some places. It's a film that is set in early 20th century Germany, and so there are certain implications that the essayist here, Mahajan, is making in the context of his discussion of the Serpent's Egg. On page 153, on the right-hand side column, in the first full paragraph, it starts, well, it's talking about The Serpent's Egg and about the film, which is about German society. And then the essayist, Mahajan, writes this: Bergman had spent a year in Germany in the 30s when he was 16 as part of an exchange. His host family gifted him a photograph of Hitler for his birthday, and Bergman was awed by Hitler's charisma at a rally he attended. He remained a fan of the Nazis right up until the end of the war, admitting that when the doors to the concentration camps were thrown open, at first I did not want to believe my eyes. Perhaps this is why he was tempted, in The Serpent's Egg, to atone with a grand political statement, as evidenced by the tiresome historical monologue Dr. Vergeras delivers at the end. So this is a very curious paragraph, and it makes reference to something that I think has been referred to in some past writings on Bergman, and also some interviews given by Bergman, but it's never been too prominent, which is essentially this thing, which is he remained a fan of the Nazis right up until the end of the war. And this is a very curious aspect of Ingmar Bergman's life. And the fact that it's only addressed in this essay, in this one paragraph, or kind of half a paragraph way, is a little bit, I would say, it's a little bit disappointing on the part of the Criterion Collection. Now, I should be absolutely clear. Let me be absolutely clear. Now, it's not saying, at least in terms of the words here, it's not saying that Bergman was a Nazi. It's not saying that Bergman was a member of the Nazi Party. But I'm disappointed in the sense that Criterion did not seem to take it upon itself to try to address this particular aspect of Bergman's life, which I think is, while not necessarily something that is in and of itself, well, I should put it this way. It's something that I think needed more attention. It's something that I think needed some kind of supplement or some kind of essay or maybe an extra paragraph or something, anything presented by the Criterion Collection that would have presented some side or facet of this discussion. The way it's presented in this essay, I mean, it's perfectly fine that it's brought up. I have nothing against bringing it up because it's something that has been documented in the past. But the fact that it was brought up in this way, and there is no citation or any kind of attribution to any primary source material given in this essay. So it's not possible for me to there's no bibliography or anything, so I can't do any checking up or verification of this quote. I think it comes from an article from the BBC News that was published online in the I think it was in the late 90s or early 2000s. But again, there is no citation given in this essay, so it's very difficult for the reader to try to follow up. So you have to kind of do your own research, which is not impossible, of course. But my point is that Criterion seems to bring this point up in this essay and doesn't seem to follow through with the conversation, if you know what I mean. And again, I'm not seeking anything specific as far as Criterion needs to condemn Bergman or it needs to defend Bergman. No, I'm not going that far. All I'm saying is that there needed to be some kind of discussion on this point. Anything. Whether it was something that was trying to describe the history of the period, whether it was someone trying to maybe say something about maybe it wasn't necessarily a willful ignorance on the part of Bergman, but this was perhaps a reflection of the attitudes of people outside of Germany prior to the end of the war. Remember, this is, according to the words here, this is right up to the end of the war. So this is some kind of quote-unquote ignorance that seems to be displayed by Bergman prior to the end of the war. And so it could very well be that for Bergman, he truly did not know what the actual situation was with respect to the Holocaust. And maybe for many people up to 1945, this was something that was not known. Although, well, I don't want to get into too much detail about that. But so my point is that I think there should have been something that Criterion could have done to present this. Now, I think I've gone through the supplemental material in this box set once, so who knows, maybe there is something in the supplemental material that I didn't catch. But as far as I can tell, I don't think there's anything substantive about this particular point. And because of that, I must say that I'm a little bit disappointed by the presentation of this material, because it seems to be bringing up this point without necessarily giving us a fuller discussion on this point. And I think this point deserves a fuller discussion. Once the fuller discussion is made, then one can debate whether or not this is something that Bergman should be condemned for, or maybe this is something that he needed to atone. And if it is indeed the case that you think that it's something that is something that he needed to atone for, did he indeed atone for it in the context of his films or not? I think that's a perfectly valid question to make, but unfortunately the groundwork for that kind of discussion or debate hasn't been established enough by Criterion, in my opinion. And so that is, I think, the main criticism I would have of this particular set, which is, unfortunately, it doesn't address that side of Bergman's life in a way that feels fully rounded. It feels very much a celebration of Bergman's filmography and thus his life, which I'm perfectly fine with. But there needed to be something that addresses this point as well, because the point is brought up by the essayist here, and so I wasn't necessarily looking for it when I was reading it, but it was brought up as I was reading it. And the fact that it was brought up, but then there was no follow-through or finish with that discussion, was a little bit frustrating from my point of view. So I have to admit that. And so I think this is something that really needed a little bit more from a Criterion, maybe some kind of supplement, or maybe reliance on a historian or something, an essay, something that really would have helped. And I think it's because of that that I have to be critical of this set. Now, again, please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that this means that Bergman must automatically be condemned. I'm not saying that anyone who therefore loves the films of Bergman is, there's something morally reprehensible about taking that approach. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not suggesting that at all. What I am suggesting, though, is that this point being brought up in this way just needed to have, I think, a fuller discussion by someone in some capacity, presented in some fashion by via supplemental material in this Criterion Collection box set. So that is, for me, and then once that discussion is made, then one can make the determination for oneself whether that is sufficient. And if it is for you, great. And if it's not, then how then can one square this aspect of Bergman's life with an appreciation of his films? And I think that discussion is a perfectly valid one to make, and I think it's different depending on your approach. And so, but again, I have to repeat this. I think the foundations for that kind of discussion are not adequately made by the Criterion Collection. I think they should have been. So I'm just talking about the foundations for that kind of discussion. Once the foundations are there, then one can think and reason and make a determination based on one's own understanding of the facts. So that's my general criticism, is that the threshold foundation wasn't well established, in my view, with respect to this particular point by the Criterion Collection. And so I wish there could have been something more, and especially because this box set, I think, might be looked upon for years to come as one of the hallmarks, one of the great reflections of Bergman's cinema. This will probably be seen as a milestone in terms of Bergman's cinema, and so I think it would have been a richer and more fuller Bergman experience had this particular aspect been addressed in maybe in a more well-rounded way. And I don't think it would have necessarily harmed Bergman's reputation necessarily, in the sense that it would have given us a fuller picture, and thus it would have just given us more room to try to essentially figure out what Bergman was thinking at this particular point in time in his life. Maybe for others, maybe it would have been very difficult to square that with an appreciation for his filmography, and I get that. And so maybe for others, maybe with that information, one could have made the decision that maybe Bergman's films are not for you. And I think that's also a really admirable approach to make. Again, it's just how does one make that decision if one doesn't have all the facts there? And I don't think those facts have been truly laid out in a way that is appropriate for that kind of discussion. So that is my general criticism of this box set. And for me personally, it's something that is still a question mark. If we have more information about this part of his life, then I think that kind of discussion and analysis is fair game, and it really should be made. And it's at the same time, there's not enough information here, at least included in this book, to make a decision either way. In other words, I don't think there's enough information here necessarily to make a decision necessarily that, oh, Bergman is therefore morally reprehensible and I don't want to watch any of his films ever again. Again, there isn't enough information there. There could be more that comes up that would make me feel that way maybe in the future. And so I must keep reading up on this. And so this is, yes, for me, this is an open question. And I'm very glad to have this information, but at the same time, I just wish that Criterion could have provided a little bit more background and a more foundational, provided more foundation to allow this kind of discussion, therefore, to take place. So yes, this is not an insignificant point, and it's one that I think we all should keep in mind when we are talking about the legacy of Bergman. And perhaps, who knows, it might be something that is defendable depending on the circumstances. Again, it might be something that is not defendable depending on the circumstances. Who knows? But it's just those circumstances that we need more information on. And so, yes, as far as it's being presented in this booklet, it's an open question in my opinion. And so that's, yes, that is something that I wish Criterion could have done something about. Maybe, who knows, maybe in a future Bergman release, Criterion can address this maybe in a short video essay or supplement, who knows. It would be really nice. Maybe Peter Cowie, the great Peter Cowie, has addressed this point in maybe a writing, or maybe in one of his many commentaries, and I just didn't catch it. And again, I'm not a Bergman scholar, I'm not a Bergman expert, so I haven't read everything there is to know about Bergman, and I don't know everything there is to know about his life. So so again, I'm coming at this from essentially a novice's perspective. But that being said, I feel like I need more information, and I certainly didn't get that from the Criterion collection as it presented the information through this box set. So I feel like it was incomplete, and therefore I feel like I need to seek out more information, which is a fine conclusion to have, but again, it's just an indication of this kind of shortcoming with respect to this particular box set, at least in my personal opinion. So yes, so this is, again, something that I think one should research, and I should be very clear, just because this point is brought up, that doesn't necessarily mean, therefore, that one's appreciation for all of Bergman's films and one's appreciation for the set is in any way morally reprehensible. I don't think you have to be ashamed for liking these films. I know it's this sort of topic, though, is very sensitive, and it's a very difficult one, and it should be, because it is quite potentially controversial. So, but I urge all of you to try to get as much information as you can before reaching some final decision, and whatever that decision may be, I think that's your decision, and I admire you for that. But again, just make sure you have all the information that you can. Don't necessarily rush to a conclusion without having some foundational knowledge. And I think to that end, just relying on this box set alone, I don't think is enough. So let me just end it with that. So yes, so that is my general discussion of the criticisms that I have of this box set. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I will be making more videos, but not that many, because I'm almost at the end here. So I will be making, I think, 1 or 2 more videos to conclude my discussion of this very interesting box set from the Criterion collection. So yes, so I hope to see you then, and until then, my friends, I hope you're well. To be continued.